experience. I was a military spouse for about 6 years and helped my husband go through the transition process of transitioning from active duty military to a civilian position. He had the unique challenge of being an infantry officer, and so many of his skill sets didn't necessarily translate into the civilian world. So we had a lot of conversations about like how we can translate just military experience in general into something that a civilian can understand and something that would allow him to get a position. Outside of that, I've worked at military institutions previously, where I've worked with a lot of military members and veterans. I run the Boots to Suits program here at CU Denver, where we focus on professional development and just gaining those career skills. So this is definitely an area that I really love to talk about. As Chuck mentioned, if you have questions as I go throughout things, please feel free to ask those. I will do my best to touch on each of those questions. So yeah, with that, we'll kind of go ahead and get started. So here's just my kind of quick agenda. So we're going to talk about this idea of solving the problem and how we can kind of frame our mindset for going into a job searching process and how we can kind of put this resume and cover letter together. We'll talk about like just the guidelines, tips, strategies for putting your resume together, what it looks like to tailor your resume and how we do that. We'll talk about cover letters and how we can kind of structure those. And if we have time, we'll go into some LinkedIn specific things as well. So the way that I like to kind of frame this job searching process is that I always like to look at things from the employer perspective. So I like to try and put myself in their shoes and figure out what it is that they're looking for. So when an employer posts a position opening, it's because they have a problem they're looking to solve. They have an open position with all of these responsibilities and they don't have anybody to do it. So it's our job as the job seeker to essentially, put ourselves in front of them and say, this is exactly how I can solve this problem for you. So this idea of tailoring your resume kind of comes back to that. It's the same thing as like if you've ever asked somebody a question and they've answered you, but the response didn't answer your question at all. And you're like, great, but that doesn't answer my question. Same concept. If we tailor our resume and we get specific and we really try and make our resume, geared towards this specific role, this specific problem that they have, our chances of getting to that interview phase are much, much higher. So there's a lot of myths out there about resumes. I can make this smaller. A lot of myths out there about resumes. One is that a lot of people think that you should use the same resume for every position. But again, like I just mentioned, with this kind of idea of solving the problem, we should be tailoring our resume to every position that we are applying for. Doesn't necessarily mean like a full overhaul, but it does mean that we're making little tweaks kind of here and there as we are applying to civilian positions. Another myth is that a resume should include all of your experience. It should be all the positions you've had, all the education, all the credentials, all the schools, everything on there. And that would be more of like a CV. A resume is really just a highlight. It's specific highlights that you get to choose what you decide to put on there. And we're tailoring and kind of picking and choosing what we put on there based on the position and the company and what it is that they are looking for. Resumes for some industries can be 1 page or limited to 1 page, but the general kind of rule is between 1 and 2. Any longer than that, and we likely will lose recruiters or hiring managers from looking at our recruiter, but 1 to 2 pages is pretty standard for a resume. I see a lot of times too that veterans and military members get kind of frustrated with putting their military experience on a resume because civilians have a hard time understanding sometimes what it is that you did, what your position was or what it entailed. And so sometimes that leads us to significantly decrease or condense what you put on there for your military experience. I know my husband, when he was his first position out of the military was for a manufacturing company. And someone had said to him, like you should just condense all your military experience down to one position. And he was in the military for 10 years. So the amount of positions and work that he had done was an insult really to say that he should condense it down to one position. So I do not take that approach. I think your experience is valuable, and that we really can utilize, what we pick out of your military experience to exemplify that you're qualified for the positions you're applying for. And the last one is that there's this myth that there are different types of resumes, that we have, a business resume, and we've got an engineering resume, and we have an academic resume, and there's all these different types. And really what we kind of focus on with the resume is just that tailoring piece. So there's not like a one size fits all for an engineering resume or a one size fits all for a business resume. There are guidelines and things that we recommend that you incorporate into your resume, but there's not a specific type format that you really need to follow, because it should be a representation of you. So guidelines for resumes. So typically we have, some pretty standard sections that we would include on a resume. Biggest thing is you should always have your contact information, and that should always be a header. So at the top of your resume, you want to make sure that your name is the biggest thing and the easiest thing for them to find. If we imagine that recruiters are going through hundreds of resumes, we want to make sure that if they find something that they like on our resume, it's very easy for them to figure out how to contact us. Your contact information should always be your name, phone number, email. Address is optional. Some people now will put city and state. Some people will leave it off entirely. It's really personal preference, but I would say if you plan on posting your resume on any sort of online website, I would leave your personal address off of it just in case that gets leaked. And you can also include your LinkedIn URL. Some people will choose to include a personal or professional summary. That's typically one of the first sections at the top of your resume. It also could be called an objective or a summary of qualifications. They all kind of are similar, but it's usually 3 to 4 sentences or bullet points that really highlight the most relevant experiences from your background. An objective typically looks like something like I am seeking a position in, whatever, and then we kind of connect it back to our background. Whereas a professional summary kind of focuses on those highlights and things that you really want to showcase that you have experience with. Your next section would be your education. So you always want to list your most recent degree first. High school could be removed from here. And after that, you can choose if you want to include minors, certificates, your GPA, honors, any relevant coursework. It's all about that tailoring piece. If a course that you took in your education is relevant, we can put it on there. If a job requires that you have a certain GPA, we can put it on there. If the minor or certificate is relevant, add it. But really it's kind of more about formatting and room and what you can fit on there. The next thing would be your experience. So your experience section can include a lot of different things, but experience, I think a lot of times is looked at as like just professional experience, like working experience. But it can be volunteer experience, could be projects you worked on, could be volunteer, could be, I don't know, anything. Experience is experience. It doesn't have to be paid, and it doesn't necessarily have to be full-time. But typically you would want to have your kind of formatting the same for all of those, including your position title, organization name, the location would be city and state, and then your bullet points kind of describing what you did in that position. So there's a lot of other sections that we can include on here. And again, this is your resume. This is a representation of you and who you are and what you want to put forward. So we're thinking about, if we're applying for this position, let's say as a project manager, what of my background is going to be most relevant to that, And then we kind of tailor and create these sections based on that. So if you have, let's say in technical skills, if you have a PMP or you're working towards a PMP, that may be something to put on there. If you are a part of a professional association or have a membership, maybe have presented at a conference or done a training, those are things that we can include on there if they're relevant to the position. But these are all additional options for resume sections. Make sure I don't have any questions. Feel free to ask questions as we go throughout too. I know I'm getting through this quickly, so we can kind of pause at the end too and see if you have any questions about anything. So my suggestion with kind of the work experience section is that a lot of times I see on resumes that it says like, for our experience section, we'll have professional experience or just work experience, something very general, but we can tailor that and you can get creative with what you put on here. So for example, a lot of times I get asked too of like, well, how do we tailor? How do we, make sure that they're seeing what we want to see? Let's say, for example, it is, go back to a project management type position. If we are looking for that type of role, maybe we call it project management experience. And then we could maybe list a position you had in the military, or maybe you're in a club that kind of focuses on that. Or maybe you had a project where you utilize some of those skill sets. But those things could all then fall under this project management experience. So we can do that instead of feeling like we just have to have all of our military experience under one section or all of our work experience under another. We can kind of pull things from different areas and move it around on our resume so that we're getting them to see what we want them to showcase. These are just kind of some examples of other types of headers that you could put, or subheaders that you could put on your resume for how to list your experience. Again, the benefit of this is that you get to pull from different areas. And if you are applying for a position in project management and we really want to highlight that experience, the higher up on your resume we can put it, the easier it's going to be for the recruiter to find it. And so that's going to kind of bump you up in this process if they don't have to go digging for the information. For education, similar things, you can, focus like a projects section on whatever it might be, international business projects, or if there's a specific course or something like that, we can use specific words in the title so that we kind of tailor in what they are looking at. All right, so specifically for military history, I know a common theme a lot of times is like, how do I translate my military experience into kind of civilian speak? And the biggest thing that I can tell you is that for civilians, it's really hard to understand all that you did in the military. Like the positions that you have entail way more than a civilian position does. And so it's hard for them to comprehend like that you would have to do all those things in one position. I was talking with a candidate last year in our Boots to Suits program about her resume, and she was telling me about her experience working as an MP. And while she was doing this position as an MP, she was also in charge of this whole other project that was definitely could have been a whole other job or two other jobs. And so we separated those out because that other thing that she did was way more focused on kind of the, hers I think was project management side of things that she wanted to go into. So we kind of pulled it out from a larger position so that we could break it down into separate positions and separate parts. It's easier for civilians to understand when we really kind of break things down and simplify them so that they can understand like what all went into that position, that role, that task. My next suggestion, any questions so far?
Can I ask it?
Yeah,
I was gonna type it, but then
yeah.
so I was just thinking, do you have any suggestions of like the best way to narrow down what kind of jobs I'd just even be interested in looking at based off of my experience? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I kind of know what I like, but I don't know what it would be like an end job.
Yeah, totally. So there's lots of different ways that we can kind of go about that. In our office here, we try and break it down into sections. So I guess like the couple general things I would tell you is that a lot of times we don't always know what we like. It's really hard to pinpoint what we like or what we want to go into, but we definitely know what we don't like. So you can always start there too, of like narrowing down what we don't want to do, as just a way to kind of like condense the list. I typically recommend, are you in the process of like starting the job search, or are you a little ways out and just trying to figure out like what you might want to
Well,
do?
I actually have a job, and I am a project manager, but I'm also, and I like it, but I was just curious because, like I have a way that I got to my job, but I was wondering if there was just like other suggestions, like just in general, like what you would think of when you are, when someone is going through that process.
So everyone is different, every student is kind of has their own specific situation. I would say, we start, if we're totally undecided and we have no idea what we want to go into, from the career perspective, we break it down into 4 different things. We can do some more work around like just values, like what it is that you want in your position, salary, title, location, whatever it might be. We can focus on that. We could focus on your interests. So like, what do you enjoy doing? What did you enjoy in the military? What do you enjoy in your classes? And kind of come at it from that perspective. We can look at it from your personality, how you kind of enjoy going about the work that you want to do. Skills is probably the easiest way to do it, I think, for veterans, because it's very kind of concrete. And it allows us to really draw upon what you do really well, and then look for positions where you would be able to utilize those skill sets. So those 4 areas are typically ways that, like, from in my office, that we like break it down when we're totally undecided. If you have an idea of what you want to go into, what I would say is, you start looking at those positions on job boards. So let's say, if you like your position in project management, you can go to LinkedIn and type in project manager and see what else comes up. Because more often than not, you'll have different job titles, different responsibilities, different things that will kind of come up. So I would start writing those things down. Like, what do I like about my job? What are the parts that really kind of motivate me, excite me, make me feel like I'm doing good work? And then you can use that as your search criteria, to look for different positions that will still be kind of in line with what you're looking at, but really focus on those things that you do enjoy.
Thank you. Yeah, that was perfect.
Any other questions so far? Okay. So then the other part that I would say with breaking down your military history, is this tailoring piece of picking the jobs or the responsibilities that are most relevant to the position. I would argue that we can tailor most positions, most experience towards any role. It's all about how you frame it, how you brand it, how you decide to talk about that specific thing. But you want to pick the things that are easy for you to talk about, that you can directly make those connections, that will make it easier on you once you get to that interview process. So pick the job responsibilities or experiences that are most relevant to the position and highlight those. Using the job description can be a really great way to figure out what they're looking for. So a big question is like, well, okay, I know that I need to tailor it and I know I need to adjust my resume, but what does that look like? We will look at a job description and kind of talk about how you can pull out some of these qualifications and things that they're looking for, but utilize the job description to see if they're looking for communication, leadership, you know, the ability to like drive strategy and that kind of thing. We use that, and then we think about, okay, when have I done these things in my experience? Where is a job that I've utilized that? When is an experience where I've been able to kind of do these things? So we use the job description to be able to pull out what it is that they're looking for, and then we connect it back to our experience. And then the last thing is that you want to provide as much context as is necessary. So when you are writing your resume, part of the process that I go through with students, I just had one actually a couple days ago who said, do you want me to send you my resume so you can kind of, we're going to work on creating a new one. She said, do you want me to send you your resume and all of her other military documents and trainings and things that she had gone through? And I said, no, because part of this process is that I want to hear you explain it to me, because I have some military background, but I definitely won't know everything that you're talking about. So being able to explain it to somebody who doesn't have a background in the military so that they can understand it. When we're writing our resume, you have to think about, like, if somebody has no military background, what context, what description, what words would I need to use so that they are able to understand what I'm talking about? Acronyms are a great example. Cut acronyms out from your resume. It follows the same guidelines as any kind of, like, you know, English writing. If you're going to use an acronym, you have to explain what it is first, and then you can use the acronym later. But you have to provide that context so that whoever is reading it can understand what it is that you are talking about. So you provide as much context as they need to understand this experience, this responsibility, whatever it was. So you can find lots of documents out there that can help kind of translate your military to civilian communication. But one thing, so there's what I would recommend is just going to Google and typing in military to civilian translation, and you'll get lots of documents that bring these sorts of things up. But just adjusting our language so that we speak and we write in a way that makes sense to civilians. So instead of saying a mission, we could say task or function or objective. Instead of saying deployed, we could say overseas assignment. Instead of saying like field exercises, we could say training or training operations. You know, and for the specific roles, leader, squad leader, you can use things like supervisor, manager, words that will kind of connect to the civilian world and the civilian positions. So it can definitely be hard. You're going to be retraining your brain to kind of speak, talk, think in a different way. So I would start with your resume. Grab a sheet like this, kind of go through your resume with a fine-tooth comb and pick out these words, you know, that might be military lingo, jargon, whatever you want to call it. Circle them, and then kind of over time work on replacing those with some of these other words so that we can kind of translate into that civilian world. The other thing you can do is give your resume to somebody who is a civilian, somebody who has no military background at all. Could be professor, could be friend, could be neighbor, could be family member. But give it to someone who doesn't have a background in that, and have them go through your resume and have them tell you what makes sense to them, what they don't understand. Maybe pick out some of these words. It's another really great way to just kind of get at the overall language and your communication style in your resume. So this communication piece is really big on your resume. It's also very big in the interview process. So it's a good practice to kind of start trying to translate your communication style so that we kind of assimilate into civilian culture and remove a little bit of that military communication. And not altogether, but just in these certain situations, being able to kind of pull in your civilian speak language. So for example, if we were to say, I pulled my people together and told them the situation, that's probably something that would be very common if you're, in a training exercise or whatever it might be. As a civilian, we may say, I gathered my team together and communicated the situation. So we're saying gathered, it's a little bit softer than pulled. If we can imagine like physically pulling people, that's what it's going to come off to as civilian or for civilians. So gathered sounds a little bit softer. Same thing with told. Told is a little bit more forceful. It's a little bit more direct, and communicated and implies that we're kind of bringing people together. We are working as a team. And a lot of times those are skill sets that are heavily looked at for positions. So these are just some words that can really help with kind of creating stronger communication. Another great thing to do is just to Google resume verbs or verbs for resumes or something like that. And you'll, same thing, get a ton of lists that will come up that will have all kinds of verbs for, usually they break it down into different types of verbs. So like verbs where you led a project, verbs where you collaborated with a team, things like that. And that can also help you kind of switch out what your language looks like on your resume. So I would recommend that, like, as you start to put your resume together, just think about if there are maybe verbs that you can switch out and utilize so that they just helps to strengthen your resume and really kind of conceptualize what it is that you did for the recruiter or hiring manager looking at your resume. So I'm not sure that I'm going to actually go through this, but I would recommend maybe taking note of this because it can be a really great way to start this practice of like how we kind of can translate our military experience. So if you decide to do this later, I would just write down one task from your military experience that exemplifies something. It can be your ability to problem solve, it could be critical thinking, it could be working through conflict, could be leadership, could be any of these kind of transferable skills, so to speak. But I would pick one thing, one experience that kind of exemplifies that. So when is the time you utilized leadership? When is the time you utilized, problem solving? And write it down. Write down the whole kind of story, the who, what, where, when, how, so to speak, and then go back and read it and look at, are there any acronyms? Are there language that might not make sense to someone without a military background? Did you explain all the details? Do you have enough context? But writing it down and kind of reflecting on that can allow you to see if this is something that would make sense and how we can kind of formulate that on your resume in a way that would make sense to a civilian. Questions on that? Okay. All right, so now let's talk about keywords and tailoring. So how we actually kind of tailor our resume. So why is tailoring your resume important? Bring up a couple different things here. Have any of you heard of, try and pull this back up. Have any of you heard of an applicant tracking system before? You can just like raise your hand on the little emoji thing. Just see where everyone's at. No, nobody. Okay. So this will definitely be a good thing to know. So an applicant tracking system, or goes by ATS for short, was something that was implemented back during the Great Recession. So when the Great Recession hit and we had all of these people looking for jobs, employers were just getting an influx of resumes and cover letters for all these different positions. They would have hundreds and hundreds to review. And so recruiters stopped being able to review all of those resumes by printing them and reading them out, which is what had been done previously. So they created these systems called applicant tracking systems, where they essentially kind of funnel all of these resumes through this system. They put in, the things that they're looking for, qualifications, keywords, so on and so forth. And then they essentially kind of pick out the resumes that match that. So this started to become a very common practice with resumes and is widely used today. If you've ever applied for a position online, they use an applicant tracking system. It's almost every single company because it streamlines the process. The level that company uses a applicant tracking system is different. So some companies use it just to track how many applications they've got, what has been reviewed, so on and so forth, all the way up to like some companies will literally put in, we want these keywords, we want these qualifications, we want this number of experience, and it will pull out the resumes that match that. I've even heard of it being as strict as like, we have a few hundred applications and they're picking up a top 10 before someone even looks at it, before a person even sees it. So it's a big part of the process now, and that is why tailoring your resume is so important and why those kind of keywords and really trying to solve that problem for the employer is so important. So there are a couple of ways that you can kind of test your resume, so to speak. So SkillSyncer, JobScan, and Resume Worded are 3 websites that you can use where you can input the job description, upload your resume, and it will show you whether or not, like what the match is. It gives you a percentage of how close it is to that job description. So that's a good way to kind of identify where you're at. But we also will kind of go through in a couple minutes here, like how we pull out those keywords from a resume, how we identify what it is that they're looking for, so that you can do this on your own too, as you're updating, each resume. We know resumes are only reviewed for a few seconds, so we always want the most important information up front. We want to make sure that we are getting to a person as fast as we can, and so this tailoring piece is always a very important part of that. And the last piece we can kind of talk about when we get to LinkedIn too, but you always want to apply through the company website. Places, or I should say like job boards like LinkedIn, Indeed, Handshake, they all have their own applicant tracking system. So if you've ever seen like the easy apply button on LinkedIn or apply now on Indeed, those go through their own applicant tracking system. So that site, Indeed, LinkedIn, decides whether or not you are qualified for the position and if they're going to pass your resume on to the recruiter of that company before it even gets there. So if we can skip any hoops, I highly recommend, if you find the job on, LinkedIn or Indeed or something like that, great. Go to the company website and apply directly there so that we can skip one whole ATS system in and of itself.
Hey, Sydney.
Yeah.
Would there be any benefit to applying on LinkedIn and through the company website to like really make sure that you potentially get through, or would that be kind of silly?
So I would say what I would do is apply through the company website. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doubling your application just because it'll probably confuse them. Like, why do we have 2 in here? Are these any different? And then they'll spend more time trying to figure out if they're the same or different. So I would recommend just applying through the company website, but something that you can do on LinkedIn is like follow the company, follow them on LinkedIn so that they can go back and see that you're interested in what they do, check out their page, see if you're connected with anybody there. So you can make a connection on LinkedIn without having to apply through there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The only way that I would apply through a website like that is if you get reached out like from a recruiter and a recruiter says like, submit your stuff through LinkedIn or something like that. But otherwise, I'd go through the company website. So when we're looking at a job description, keywords are kind of all over the place. So in the, usually like the first part of the job description, they will talk about either the job itself. They usually will give some sort of a background for the company and what they stand for, mission, vision, values, all that kind of stuff. But keywords can be in there. Keywords can be in this kind of responsibilities part. And it also can be in like the qualifications as well. Typically, things to look for with keywords are repeating words. If you see the same thing kind of over and over again in here, it's definitely going to be a keyword in the applicant tracking system. If there's any kind of like programs, systems, softwares, things that you would be utilizing. Let's see what this one has in here. If there's any things that you would be utilizing in the job description itself, you know, like especially for like cybersecurity or IT type things, we see like Python, C++, like coding languages, that kind of thing. Those can be keywords. And any responsibilities that are going to be like critical for this type of role. So for example, it could be like project reviews, escalation process, project reporting down here, things like that, that are specific to this project management type role and the responsibilities that you would be utilizing. So we'll go through kind of like a little activity here. So I want you to just look at this job description and see if you can pull out some of the keywords. And if you want to just type them into the chat, we can look at them that way and just kind of work through what this might look like. Yep, quality reviews. Trying to figure out where to put these so you guys can see them. Yeah, escalation process. Demand model, project changes. Yep. Cross-functional teams is a big one that's used a lot. Managing or management is in here a lot. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 just in the first paragraph, and there's tons in the responsibilities down here. Yep, risk management. These are all good. Yes. So any of the like key responsibilities that you're going to be doing, repeating words, even as much as like the action verbs, plan, execute, manage, develop, recommend, identify. Those are all things that you also can use in your resume that are pretty easy to kind of switch out. So when I talk about tailoring, I'm not saying that we lie on our resume and say like, yes, I've done all of these things, and we just copy and paste what they say in the job description onto our resume. What I mean is that if they have, you know, executing projects or into implementing cost-effective business solutions, then we think about, is there a time I've done that in my experience, and can I use some of the same language on my resume when I'm describing what I did and what my experience looks like. All right, so pull out some of the keywords that I found in here. So again, you'll see some of those action verbs: scope, plan, execute, a lot of the things that we mentioned, cross-functional teams, business change process, quality reviews, project reporting, all things that we mentioned too. So there's a lot of things in here, right? You don't have to hit all of these, but the goal is that we try to hit as many as will connect to our experience. I would say, you know, it doesn't have to be all of your experience. So maybe pick the couple of positions that are most relevant and then try and tailor those. In addition, if you have like a professional summary at the top, that's always a good place to kind of tailor as well. Questions about keywords and how we kind of pull those out? Okay. All right, so for bullet points I think are one of the hardest parts to write on a resume. But essentially the bullet points is where we can really put in a lot of these like action verbs and keywords that they're looking for. So those are bullet points under each of your positions or experiences that you're listing on there. The general kind of guideline is we want to have 3 to 5 bullet points per experience. That really kind of keeps your consistency on your resume so that we don't have like 2 here and 6 there and 3 here. 3 to 5 gives you kind of a nice layout so that if you fall somewhere within that, it'll look fairly consistent on your resume. You want to make sure that you're using the correct tenses. So if it's a current position, you should be using present tense verbs. If it's a past position, you should be using past tense verbs. And anytime that you can quantify your accomplishments, especially your military experience, you will have big numbers, like huge percentages. You have done more than the average person has with your level of experience. So utilize those metrics, those things that are going to allow you to quantify what you did and really stand out among the crowd. So if you worked with a team, how many people were on your team? If you were responsible for anyone, how many people? If you ran a program or training exercise or whatever it might be, the numbers, the metrics, kind of try to quantify those. And the general kind of guideline for that structure is action, verb, task, result. So there's 3 parts to the bullet point format. Your first word should always be your action verb: planned, supervised, managed, executed, implemented, something like that. Task is what you actually did. So you want to say what you did and how you did it. Supervised a team of 20 by, and then whatever the things were that you did with that, what you did and how you did it. And then the most important part is the result. That's the so what. Why do they care? Why do they need to know? What is the purpose of whatever you did to increase, you know, whatever, increase efficiency or something like that. You want to showcase whatever it is that was the result or the outcome of what you did. All right, so I'll just show you a couple of examples in here of bullet points. So I don't really like saying bad, but get the gist of like a not as great bullet point would be something very short, doesn't give a lot of context. Responsible for providing technical support. It's a good place to start, but we want to expand on that and say like, well, one, my question would be, what does responsible mean? Can we use another verb that's maybe a little bit stronger? How did you provide technical support? What did you do and how did you do it? You know, were you going out to different places? Were you meeting with people? How many? That kind of thing. And then we're missing the outcome. What's the point of providing this technical support? A better option would be met with top level department managers to understand technical support needs and provide solutions. So still good. We're giving more detail. We're providing that context. We have the result in here, but we want to really try and emphasize on how we did it and include metrics whenever we can. Increase ticket return effectiveness by 40% through collaborating with top level department managers to create a successful technical support lifecycle and response program. Very detailed, very well written, gives a ton of kind of context and quantifies those metrics for your reader. All right, I'm gonna skip through this one. Okay, so I just want to pause here. Questions on resumes, tailoring, anything like that that I didn't cover or that you want more clarification on?
I have a question. So, like, I think I am able to capture my military experience really well. How am I, like, I was an Intel analyst in the Navy, and now I'm going into software. How am I able to like convey what I've done at school and my education system and my education to like employers? Because they like right now, I think my resume speaks more to an intelligence analyst than a software engineer.
Yeah, so you want to capitalize on the experience that you do have in your academics. So you can focus on like projects that you've done in school. You could list relevant coursework that you've been involved in. A lot of times that relevant coursework will also be some of those keywords that they're looking for. You know, any like the systems, programs, softwares, if you can include like a skills section where you have experience in that, that's another great way to kind of tailor. And with your work experience, whether that be military or other, it's about that tailoring piece too. So look for those verbs, look for those responsibilities that they are looking for. Like, let's say it's cross-functional teams or something like that. Probably something that you utilized in the military. So we just kind of tailor that bullet point more towards the positions you were looking for rather than kind of the intel side of things.
Thank you.
Other questions? So something else I'll say too that I didn't share as much about, I know there was a question about federal resumes and kind of how we put a federal resume together. Federal resumes are very specific. They are actually much different than kind of a traditional resume. And that's the only category that really I can think of that falls outside of these kind of normal guidelines. What I would suggest for a federal resume is there are some really great YouTube videos. If you just type in like how to write a federal resume, there are lots of videos out there that the government has put out about how to put a federal resume together. Like our HR division puts these together to really help students learn how to write those types of resumes. They are pretty long. They want to see all of your experience. They ask for specific information on there. And so those YouTube videos really kind of walk through each step of the process. The other thing that can be beneficial is on USA Jobs. There is a federal resume creator where you can download their template and kind of input all of your information in there so that you hit everything that they are looking for. Federal resumes don't have to be super tailored. They don't have to be super, you know, as like specific, as much of a highlight reel as another resume would kind of for any other industry. So I would recommend YouTube video and their template that's on there to make sure that you're capturing all the information, because they use an ATS system that will filter through everything that you have on there. And they use kind of a system for like checking off to make sure that you have all these qualifications. All right, anything else before we dive into cover letters?
For federal, then, is it almost a CV rather than a resume?
Yeah, it looks like a resume, but it's lengthwise very much like a CV, where you kind of list, they want you to list everything, chronological order. You know, they ask for like full-time or part-time. I think they ask for, you know, location and title and all these kind of specific things. So it's much closer to a CV. All right, so let's jump into cover letters quick. So a lot of times I get the question of like, do I really have to write a cover letter? Why do I have to write a cover letter? What is it for? And really the point of a resume is to get you to the interview phase, right? Like the resume is kind of a check block thing to make sure that you meet the qualifications of the position, that you could do the role, you have the experience for it. But the goal is to get us to that interview phase. Typically cover letters, they may be read at the same time that your resume is reviewed, but a lot of times the search committee, hiring managers will read your cover letter prior to the interview, because the cover letter should tell them more about you and who you are and why you're there, why you are interested in this position. So the cover letter really should be aimed at answering this question of like, why should I hire you? Why are you interested in the position? They want to learn more about you and your personality and why you're there. A cover letter should or can be an opportunity to kind of dive into a few specific experiences. It can allow you to, if there's anything you want to like clarify or just point out that maybe doesn't have a place on the resume, cover letter can be a great place to put that. But it really allows you to kind of make a connection with this position and the organization and show how you could fit into that. So we talk a lot about these application materials that you submit for a position are all different data points. So a resume should provide information about your background, your experience, what you're kind of coming into with this role. Your like transcripts can provide more of your academic history. References can talk about your character, your personality. The cover letter should answer this question. Really, I would say it's two. Why should I hire you, and why are you interested in this position, so that they can make that connection with you and learn more about why you are there. This is kind of my general outline for a cover letter. So I kind of operate off of 4 paragraphs. So your first paragraph should really identify the position that you are applying for. It's a great place to name drop. If you were connected by somebody or with someone for this position, it's a great place to say, I was referred to apply for this position by so-and-so, somebody who works at the company. Great way to network. And then you kind of state why you are applying using information from the company website. So anytime that we can make a connection with what they do, how they do it, why they do it, the mission, vision, values part of it, it's always a good way to kind of lead into the rest of our cover letter. Your first paragraph then, kind of after our introduction, should be focused on the company. So again, I've been on several hiring committees, and my question, if I see somebody, especially who maybe is making a career transition or is, coming from a different field, my first question is, why are you making this transition? What are you here for? Why are you interested in this? So if you can make a connection in that first paragraph of like, what really drew me to this position is, or I was really excited to apply for this position because, and then we kind of talk about maybe 1 or 2 specific things from the job description or the company that drew you in, that brought you here, because that is going to tell the employer like, so cool. I love that that's what they connected to. I love that that's what they were interested in. I want to hear more about it. I want to learn more about them. So paragraph 1 should be focused on the company. Paragraph 2 then is kind of tying in your experience to that position or that organization. So we talked about why we're interested in it, and then we talk about how we are qualified for it, and just highlighting maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 things that kind of qualify you for this role. I find that what stands out is if we can tell a story or maybe describe 1 specific experience in detail, it's going to make a stronger connection than if we just reiterate what we have on our resume. I've done this and I've done this and I've done this and I've done this, and that's why I'm connected to this role, is really just kind of repeating information that they already know. So if we can expand on maybe 1 experience or 1 job and say like, this is what I really did in this position that connects me to this role, you're going to have a stronger fit with them. And then your last paragraph is really just kind of wrapping it up and reiterating your passion for the position and the organization, and then thanking them for their consideration. All right, questions on cover letters? A lot of times there's a lot of like templates and things out there for cover letters. The kind of general guideline is that your header should be the same as your resume. So whatever header you use on that with your name, your email address, your phone number, that should be the same thing that's on your cover letter, so they match and they go together. And then you always want to address it, have the date, and then address it to whoever it's going to, with the address listed right below that. And then a lot of times they get questions too about like who do we address it to, like the dear so-and-so. Always try to find a person if you can, if there is somebody specific listed as a contact for that position. And if not, dear hiring manager, dear search committee, something like that is usually a good professional way of addressing whoever is going to be reviewing that cover letter.
Sydney, does the cover letter, does it go through that automated process system as well? And if so, are keywords also important in the cover letter, just like the resume?
So for some companies it does go through, and for others it doesn't. I don't know that there's like a universal thing yet for cover letters, because normally the resume is the focus at the point of the ATS system. But I would say, like, if there are any keywords that you couldn't fit into the resume, more of the like transferable skills, the action verbs and things like that, resume or cover letter would be a great place to fit those in. The more kind of concrete things, though, I would keep to your resume.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I want to make sure that we leave time too for questions at the end. Do you want me to go into LinkedIn quick, Chuck?
Yeah, I think we have some time to go over this quickly. Yeah.
Okay. So with LinkedIn, a lot of times I get questions about like, who needs a LinkedIn? Why do we need to have a LinkedIn? What's the purpose of LinkedIn? How important is it? Like questions around, do I really need it and why type of thing. And I feel like it's personal preference. I think LinkedIn is a great tool. I think it can be extremely beneficial in your job searching process, but also aware that like not everybody wants to be on social media, not everybody wants to utilize it, and that's okay too. It's not something that you absolutely need. It can work for you if you want it to, but if it's not something that you want to add into kind of your process, then that's okay too. So a lot of the things that I'm going to kind of talk about are specific for if you do decide to use LinkedIn. These are some ways that it can kind of work for you. The thing that I usually say about it is like you get out of it what you put into it. So LinkedIn very much is about like the activity and how active you are on it. So if you are like commenting and liking and sharing things and looking at the news and updating your profile and you're active on it, it's going to work for you more, because it's seeing that you are active on the site. So you're going to have more, your profile is going to be showing up for more people the more active that you are. So completing your profile is a big part of that, which would include having a professional headshot, photo, your headline, which we'll talk about, your about summary, experience, education, skills, certifications. Those are all sections that you have the option to fill out in your LinkedIn profile. And so the more that you fill out, the more you're going to have for people to access, the more that you can kind of create, the brand that you want people to see. So I recommend filling out these sections kind of in full, and making sure that professional language. We're highlighting the experience we want people to see, but we're just kind of creating this well-rounded profile brand of yourself. There is an open to work feature on LinkedIn that came around in kind of the start of the pandemic, where you can now put a banner on your profile picture that says you are open to work, which essentially signals recruiters to tell them that you are open to finding positions. People are welcome to contact you with openings. You have the option to have that public or private. If you have it private, only recruiters with like the back end premium account will be able to see it, versus the public version, it will show up with the ring around your profile so that anyone can see that you are open to work. So obviously, if you are currently working and they don't know you're going to be looking for a position, private option would definitely be better. If it's known that you're going to be making this transition, then by all means, feel free to put the banner on your profile. So activity and engagement, networking and connecting, those are all just kind of about how we're utilizing it. Connecting with alumni, connecting with previous peers, coworkers, colleagues, supervisors, but trying to kind of actively engage on the site, again, by liking, commenting, connecting with people, following companies, reading the news. Those are all ways to kind of actively engage on the website. So everybody gets to see my 10-year-old profile headshot on here. But when you are kind of updating your page, this is the first thing that anybody is going to see. So your picture will always be what people gravitate towards first. So you want to make sure that whatever kind of headshot you are using is a professional photo. If you have a career center at your school, definitely see if that's something that they will do. I know here we have kind of like a headshot station where students can take it and can come into our station and take a professional headshot for LinkedIn. So that's definitely something to look for. You can also have like family and friends take it by a window, or some kind of like natural lighting is always a good place to kind of gravitate towards. You want to make sure that whatever picture you use is a professional headshot.
Can the CU students go take those photos anytime?
Yeah. So my office that I work in is in Links Connect. So do you know where IPI is? So we are connected to the Tivoli. We're in like the Tivoli Annex.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go all the way through like the Tivoli, there's a little courtyard area, and then right across from IPI is our doors, and we've got this headshot station. You can close the door and take your own photos, but yeah, you just do it on your own cell phone in there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so then cover photo would be like this back one here. And I highly recommend changing that to something that exemplifies kind of your career and professional journey. So I always like to kind of explain like why I chose mine and how I got to that point. So as a career counselor, a lot of what I do is kind of helping students navigate just this career transition, regardless of what phase they are in. And I very much look at that process as a journey. It is very much just kind of like, has a lot of twists and turns, has a lot of, stops and pull-offs along the way. But I think of it as like driving in the mountains, right? Like we're going up and down and all over the place. And it's just kind of this winding road that we go down. And I very much enjoy that process and getting to be on that journey with students. I also chose this picture because I love being outside. I live in Colorado, so I love being in the mountains. I love being in fresh air, especially right now with the fall weather. It's beautiful. And so I felt like this was a good kind of combination of like both my personal and professional identities coming together. It exemplifies kind of what I enjoy most about what I do, and just kind of, yeah, represents that for me. So choosing some sort of a photo that really exemplifies what you want your professional identity to be can set you up and really just kind of create this brand for you as you move into this kind of career transition. Other things on this page, the other kind of key highlight would be where I've got career counselor, practical and effective career strategies, talent development, strengths-based coaching. That is called your headline on LinkedIn. And that is a very, very important part that I would highly recommend putting a lot of thought and consideration into. Recruiters can actually find candidates based on the language that you use in that headline. It allows people to be able to search for you. And it also allows you to kind of, again, create this brand and focus in on what you want people to know about you. So a lot of times I see that, you know, students or clients in general will put just like their current job title. I think that's what this defaults to, is your current job title. And most people don't know that you can actually change that. So I would recommend really trying to think about what it is, how you do it, what you want people to focus on. What are those highlights? What are those things that if we only get, you know, I think it's like 120 characters in here, what do we want to say about ourselves that's going to really kind of target people in? So it's an important part of it. So when we talk about kind of creating, you know, with LinkedIn, I talk a lot about creating your own personal brand, and you get to decide what people see about you. You get to decide, you know, what pieces you want to show with people. So in LinkedIn, there is a part where you can write a, it's called an about summary, I think, in there. It's kind of after they see your headline, it's the next thing that they will see in there. And there's a lot of different ways that you kind of can craft that. You can include kind of a brief career summary, talking about, you know, what you did over the course of your career so far. You can highlight areas of expertise. If there are things that you are really good at, that's a great place to highlight those. You can talk about what sets you apart, any skill sets or strengths, experience that would set you apart from other people applying to similar positions. You can talk about your own kind of philosophy, goals, and approach towards the work that you do. And again, this is another way to like set yourself apart. How you think about it is different than how someone else thinks about it. What you bring into the organization and accomplishments. If there are key things that you've accomplished, you know, over your career thus far, that can also be a great place to highlight it. So I'll show you an example of one way that you can put this together. So it's this about summary on LinkedIn. So this one that I have in here kind of has a intro paragraph just talking about, like, in general, big picture, what this person's career has looked like so far. Gives a brief kind of intro and then goes into kind of the 1, 2, 3, 4 main areas of their expertise, what they are really good at, what they've kind of focused on in the past, you know, 20 years in their experience. So this is a really great way to just like focus people in on what you do, what you're really good at, what your accomplishments are. But this is very much a representation of you and what you want to share with people. So feel free to kind of tailor it and craft it in a way that really makes sense for your experience, your accomplishments, your skill sets. What was the other thing I was going to say about this? The other thing that this can be a lot of times is, if anyone's heard of an elevator pitch, this is essentially kind of that, in that we talk about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it is usually the kind of focus for an elevator pitch. This is the same kind of concept here. If we only have, you know, a minute for somebody to read through this, what do we want them to know about us? What is going to be most important? So this, I think, is the hardest thing to write. If we do a professional summary on our resume, or if you do this about section in LinkedIn, it's one of the hardest things to write because it's asking us to look at ourselves in a big picture way and kind of break down what we do. So I would recommend making some notes, kind of writing down some highlights and starting there, and then craft it over time. It may take, you know, a little while to get it to a point where you feel good about it, and then you'll probably adjust it again, you know, after that. It's kind of a constant work in progress. That's a good way to at least start kind of approaching it. All right, so I'm going to pause there and see if we've got any questions that I can answer.
I have a question. If you have multiple work experience at multiple locations facilitating the same role, is it worth kind of repeating that in your resume, or just is there a way to kind of mention that he did the same thing at each location?
Yeah.
Or should you differentiate and kind of come up with different tasks that you?
That's a great question. And there's lots of different ways that you could do it. So I would say, first and foremost, think about the position you're going to be applying to. And is there anything that differentiates those positions that would be important to highlight, that would cause the need to, you know, separate them into different positions? If the answer is no, then you can certainly combine them together. And, you know, you can get creative with this, but you could list, like if your job title was the same or similar, you could list the job title, the organization, and then maybe you list the locations. So rather than just saying like, you know, Denver, Colorado, or whatever, we could list those several locations on there so they know that you did it in multiple places. You could also do it in like a paragraph format. You could, sometimes I see like a career summary or early career section or something like that too, where if like timing wise they're lumped together, you can also describe them in that way, and just kind of put everything together in one spot. So I would say those are kind of two ways, but I would play around. For me, it would probably be formatting, to see like how much we have room for, you know, what does our spacing look like, because you want to make sure you've got enough on your resume so that it really exemplifies your experience. But if you've already got, you know, a page and you have all these positions that are very similar, then I would probably condense them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, quick question. What's your take on sending messages to like hiring managers, or where they say like, oh, here's the hiring team, when you see on LinkedIn? Do you think that would be a good thing, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I would say in terms of like this networking piece of it, is that networking always goes farther when we can make a direct connection somehow versus like the cold call way. I think it's more valuable if you know somebody who works at the company, like if there's an alumni or a friend or some other connection, if you can connect with them that way, that would be my preference first, to try and get connected with whoever this recruiter is through someone that you know. I wouldn't necessarily do it for every position. I would say if there's one that you really want, then you can send that message, but make sure that you craft the message in a way that's, you know, professional, reaches out to them, letting them know how interested you are, maybe give a little bit of background, and just see if maybe they'd be willing to talk with you about the position. That's always a good way to kind of intro in as well, and not just say like, hey, here's my resume. It can be more of a, I'm really interested in this position and wondering if you might have a few minutes to just talk with me about what it is that, or more about your company or how this position fits into that, or something like that, so that you can make that connection without just kind of like blasting your resume at them.
Thank you.
Are there any other burning questions?
I know resumes and cover letters are just exhilarating, but
That's so important.
they are, unfortunately, they're kind of a means to an end. So I think a lot of this stuff, as you know, as boring as they can be, sometimes they are kind of a part of the process. So I would encourage you to, you know, utilize your resources, utilize this program and even any programs at your school, have multiple people review your documents, just to make sure that you're coming across in the way that you want to.
Another quick question that you had kind of answered before, but if you can just give an example. So when you were talking about putting that experience that you learned in through school, but maybe not through a job, right? Where exactly on the resume should you put that? So like for me, all my experience and all my stuff speaks to HR, but if I want to get into sustainability, my master's is in sustainability. So how could I put those projects and that stuff about sustainability within my resume?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about kind of the resume, trying to figure out if I'm going to pull things up to show you or not. So if we're looking at the resume, you can do it really wherever. There's no like right or wrong answer to how you kind of lay it out. But what I would say is if that's where your experience is coming from, that's relevant to these positions you're going to be applying for, then we want them to see that first. So maybe that looks like, you know, you have a career summary or an objective at the top that says something about wanting to get into sustainability, you know, pursuing a master's degree in that, something along those lines. So the very first thing they see is you're going to have those buzzwords of sustainability and other things from the job description in there. Then maybe it's your education section next. And your education, you list the degree. You could always list relevant coursework in there and maybe just say, you know, relevant coursework : and then we list the rest of them. That's another great place to kind of emphasize that we have the experience there. You could do academic projects kind of within your education section. So same thing, if you just, you know, had academic projects, you always would want to like describe that because you're going to have experience in it. So you would format it similar to like a work experience where you have, you know, project title, maybe the class, location, the semester, spring, you know, 2021 or whatever. And then bullet points in there, but you could do that within education. You could do that as a whole separate section. So maybe, you know, sustainability projects becomes your header, and then you've got individual projects listed under that. But that's really going to emphasize that what you're doing in your degree and the experience that you have is upfront. It's the first thing they're going to see on your resume. And then they'll see all your other valuable and great experience that you have after that, but it's tailoring and targeting them in right at the beginning.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I think unless anybody else has any questions, which again, please feel free to just unmute and have at it. But Chuck, I know you have a couple of announcements you'd like to make really quick. Sydney, thank you so much for such a great presentation. We recorded it, so if anybody wants to see the video and review some of the things that Sydney talked about, we'd be happy to share that. But Chuck, go for it.
Yep.
Thank you, Cindy. Hopefully everyone got something out of that. Just a couple extra little things for everyone that was able to attend today. So first is the NASPITE Trade Passport. So if you're not familiar, NASPITE International, basically they focus on everything with global business, international business, training and education. So the membership, it'll provide access to their on-demand videos, webinars, different training opportunities, things like that. So there's a lot of resources on the website that you can use. Just as kind of an example, this is when you log in, you kind of get access to all these. So you can select different topics. So this one's on export fundamentals. And then they have all these different videos that you can go through and watch and learn about different aspects of business, international business. So after this event, we'll go ahead and send out the code and everything to sign up for a 1-year membership. And if you're interested, you can feel free to make an account, use that code, and then you'll have access to all of these resources. And then the second thing, we're going to be sending out soon after this event an employment workshop booklet. So it'll cover a lot of the information that we went over today. It'll have a lot of additional resources, links, things like that, different links for translating different words from military to civilian. So there'll be a lot of stuff in there. So we'll go ahead and send that out as well after this event. And then moving forward, so in the spring semester of 2023 is going to be our next big event. It'll be our main CIBERVets recruiting and networking event. So generally we invite a bunch of different companies to the event. It gives students an opportunity to network with these companies, with these recruiters, and hopefully get a job or an internship opportunity. So this is just an example of some of the companies we've had in the past. So Amazon, Sierra Nevada, Seagate. So we've had a bunch of different companies come. So it's just a great opportunity. So in the next few weeks or throughout the semester, we'll send out more information on that event, companies, sign-ups, things like that. And then if you want to stay in touch, you can email us with any questions at cybervets@ucdenver.edu. We're also on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow us. And then we post, different job opportunities, internship opportunities on there. And then all of our events, we kind of update on there as well. So feel free to follow us on there. And then if anyone else has any other remaining questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them. Otherwise, that's everything we have for you guys today. Thank you everyone for attending.
Would you be able to include the PowerPoint from today in the email that you're going to send out?
Yep, we can go ahead and get that from Cindy, and then we'll include all that. And a lot of the resources are built into that that document as well. They'll be sending out, but yeah, we'll send all that out. We also recorded this session, so we can include that as well for all of you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for attending.
Have a great rest of your day.